This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Are you back, Terry? Oh, I thought he was. Hi, good morning, Truth Seekers. This is Nanette Bartow again with Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I was under the impression we were going to be doing a completely different podcast this morning, and we were going to hear from Terry Batcher in regards to form. He's in the green room. Let's bring him back. Hi there.
Hi, I'm unable to share my documents for some reason here.
Yeah, and you know what? If you want to email those over to me, I can attempt to get them put up for you while we start the presentation. That's up to you.
Oh.
That was one of the things I was offering to do, was to be able to incorporate it in my presentation so that you could see it on screen as well and cover it from there, which is something that we can do for the future as well.
You want me to do that on your, let's see if I have the right address here. You want the handwriting document examination.com one, or the one that I've been talking, or the one that you've sent me things on, that address?
Send it to, yes. Yeah. Any of those emails will be fine. I think I've been doing findingthezodiac@gmail.com with you.
Why don't you go ahead and do that, and then I'll send this first grouping of ones we were going to talk about that have to do with the with what you want to talk about comparing to what you're currently on.
All right. Well, then let me go ahead and make some introductions then at this point. I am introducing Terry Batcher to everyone. Terry is somebody that I met through the forum, that I actually have a message board where we keep track of all of the different crime sprees in this particular series, and that can be found at nanetteB.forumchitchat.com. You can see all of the different things that Terry has presented there. We can also see different information by different participants that have come to the board to discuss these crimes. We were going to try and get some of these messages up for you as we go, just to give you kind of a little bit of a background. Terry came over to my board after Dennis's board kind of, I think, basically became full of trolls, right, Terry?
Exactly.
Okay, so what I want you to do is just go ahead and explain to everybody how you got involved in this.
Well, for me, I kind of just happened into the whole subject because I read some articles online about how DNA was clearing previously convicted people. And for whatever reason, the browser that was involved or whatever at that time linked me over to Dennis Kaufman and the subject of the Zodiac Killer. And because of the subject with him at the time was Jack Tarrance's DNA. And I thought, well, what was that Zodiac stuff all about that went down when I was a kid? I didn't know anything about it. I didn't pay any attention at the time. You know, I was in my own little Walter Mitty world. And so I crammed and read everything I could, and almost more than I would have needed to in retrospect, because a lot of the stuff is nonsense that's attached to the whole Zodiac Killer hype, as I call it. But when I thought I was, I knew enough to ask questions or talk the talk, and I didn't know that so much that there were so many trolls on there or not. It wasn't my perspective. I didn't really know any of those other people that are on there, and I looked over Dennis's handwriting comparisons, and I thought, they're pretty good. And I saw your fortification work on that, and I thought, well, that's even better, because it's you're actually a handwriting expert, and he's not. But his was a real simple little card. You've seen it. It's good. It's. And then the other stuff he had about his interview with Jack Tarrance was pretty good. I thought, wow, but they could be playing me. I'm always skeptical of anything, and I thought, well, they could be playing me, and so But the more I looked, the more I was convinced he had pretty good stuff there. And then I think it was you that we got to the subject of the Ramsey murder, which I knew very little about at that time. I still, didn't really buy into what the media was saying, certainly, and I thought it was reckless what they were doing. But so you had mentioned something about that, and I think my first reaction was when I first saw the so-called ransom note, I consider it now to be just simply a murder note, because that's what it is. And I said, gee, Nanette, how can you tell? It looks so squiggly, and I didn't know anything about it. But then the more I started looking, I go, oh my God, this is the weirdest looking document I've ever seen. It's got the tip-off should have been right away. You've got she is safe and unwarmed. There's that phrase there. The word safe is so ominous looking. Or pardon me, the word she is ominous. The way he artistically bent the letters around each other, and safe is menacing looking. And then I didn't catch the unwarmed. It was unharmed that I was fixated on, because that's the implied word. But if you look at it, it clearly shows, at least if you're looking at a tampered with copy, which is very possible these days, it should say unwarmed. And from there, I was stunned. I mean, no, that wasn't where I was stunned at. Then Katz, I had said, oh, Jack's signature, whatever word she used, Jack is all over the thing. I was, well, really? Let me see here. And so I'm looking for, well, of course, I'm thinking JT's. Oh, my God. I'm like, that's where I was stunned, because JT's are all over the thing. You can't, like I said before, you can't swing a dead cat and not hit a JT. And the primary.
So I was basically no longer crazy in your mind.
Well, yeah, I never really thought you were crazy, but when you're online and I didn't know you at all, and I didn't know Kaufman at all, I didn't know Katz at all. I still don't know how to pronounce her last name correctly, but I just duly skeptical. And when there was some reinforcement that, hey, this is ridiculous how many JTs there are. They're in primary form, but they're also in secondary and tertiary form. And it was like, this guy put JT wherever he could fit it. It was ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And you know what? They're hidden so well in plain view that it's like, oh my God. And then, after some time, I started realizing some other things about the document that were, like, for example, I think one of the next things that hit me was the hands of clock, capital D's on the last page. There's one that's shaped like the hands of the clocks. And I know that in your presentation, you were talking about how Jack was manipulating the direction on commas, or pardon, not commas, but what's the other one? Sits on top, little exclamation point. No, actually, it's right over the quote, below the quote marks on a keyboard. Anyway, those are on there and they're curved sideways. And I'm like, oh, okay. But the one that's on the hands of clock D has the same identical arc as the D has. And I think that it's the hands of clock. It's trying to say, okay, this thing went down at, I don't know, whatever you think that hands of clock looks like to you, but something like 1 or 2 in the morning. It looked more like maybe 1:30 in the morning, if that's the big hand that we're seeing there.
So some of these traits that you're actually finding in the Ramsey note, you found those to be consistent with other communications as well. So those creative or artistic designs, or the way that he formed, or the artistic way that he formed his letters, which crimes were those that you found had similarities with those nuances?
Well, of course, the Zodiac one comes up first, because that's what we were looking at at the time. But then as we got into more of your presentation and your work, we were looking much earlier in time. We were looking back to 1945. And then I did a bit of a crash course in all things, which one was it? Degnan, and probably forgot a lot of things. Degnan case, the Lipstick Killer case, and then the Black Dahlia case. And
you've recently actually kind of come to the conclusion that it also fits in with, you said, the Oakland County child murder case. Correct?
Most definitely. That's a big one. That one I've been on lately a lot for the last week or so, because I've got more and more documents on that, and got one that I want you to look at that I really need you to see, and I'm hoping to link that over to you or email it to you here fairly directly. But
I did get a chance to brief it on the forum. When I took a look at it, there was a lot of characteristics that were both similar to the lipstick killing, to the Zodiac, and to the Oakland County. Well, it is the Oakland County child. I've not actually done a handwriting examination on it yet, but there are a lot of things that are piquing my interest, like the specific letter Q that you picked out that I notated that Jack and the Zodiac share a commonality with.
Look at how
correct?
big he made it. Yeah, well, of course, correct. And he made that Q oversized. I think it's the biggest letter on the whole document. It's really ridiculously big. And so we're kind of getting to the phase of where we're starting to understand his method to his madness, and how he encoded or encrypted things by size and placement and all kinds of little parameters. And he did a lot of interchangeability of the duty of a particular letter or a figure or something like that. So there's a variable. There's something I should correct that was in my part of the note presentation. I had declared that all of the D's look like nooses. They really don't. And at first glance, I don't think that was his intention. But as you get into looking all of them, you'll find that there are some that are clearly the nooses, including, for the Ramsey case, that is, that have that feature. So, but there are also things on that note that harken back to the one you're currently on. Definitely, most definitely. So his figurines that he was using, or his little tags, or whatever you prefer to call them, follow forward and backward from where you're at with your presentation all the way up into that right through the OCCK case. That one, the terrible case. I think that was downplayed in the press at the time it went down, because I knew nothing about that. And when it came the Ramsey's turn on the media, it was a big cash cow, and you couldn't turn on the TV and not hear about the Ramsey case when that went down. But OCCK case, I don't think was broadcast that much around the country, because no one seems to know anything about it. And it was terrible, of course. And then, I should remind you that I was just joking when I commented that when you brought up D.B. Cooper and the Cooper caper, I thought, I was duly skeptical of that. I thought, oh no, Nanette, come on, really? And I was like, but what people don't realize is there's a whole bunch of documents that followed that caper that are Zodiac Check 101. I mean, it's incredible enough those things. So when we get to that one, we're going to see that, and then I think the last thing that you were saying was, one of the last things we talked about was you kind of thought that Jack pulled the crime off himself. And I'm like, well, then I learned that the composite drawing that the public sees is not accurate. And I got that from one of these experts, this Bruce Smith, said, no, the drawing was of a much older man. And that we talked about his little visit with Flo, which wasn't nice. And
the suspect himself wrote to the FBI and said that you made the composite wrong. You're showing people the wrong person. And that right there is Zodiac 101, is to tell them when they got it wrong.
Exactly. And he accentuated that. But it's the thing is I thought, well, okay, this guy is going to jump off. First of all, the FOIA files make it clear. The evidence is multiple that he did not jump near Ariel. He jumped near the center in some plowed fields. And I learned, and studying up on parachuting and the round shoots and such of the day, that a crosswind is actually your friend. If you're going to, you want to land with a crosswind going on, because it gives you you can actually step down onto the ground. And if you got a still day, you got to be really ready for the ground coming up. It's coming up fast. You got to pull up on your rings that you pull yourself up at the right moment, so you have a decent landing. So, and of course, if he jumps right center, but anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry.
That's okay. To follow this crime, just so people know that Jack actually was reported to a doctor with an injury within a month or so after the actual DB Cooper. Yes, and he had indicated that he had been playing with some kids and fallen to the cement, and that's how he grazed his hands, hurt his hip, did all of these other things. So there's even an injury to Jack that could be consistent with jumping out of a plane.
Perfect. I think it served him right. It's a little lesson. That SOB.
Yeah. All right. Well, so back to these. I have up here on my screen some of the basic facts about the Ramsey murder note. You were going to kind of go over those facts and how those cross connect between Lipstick and Zodiac.
Well, on that first page, you should find somewhere on there something that looks like a little figurine that you'd find at the one of the early crimes. I think it was a Degnan crime. You'll find one on there that's. But you're talking lipstick. Now, lipstick is not. See, the thing is, I hadn't thought about the lipstick thing or studied it for quite some time. So I'm playing some catch-up ball to you, and things. My memory needs to be refreshed. So I'm going to fall a little short of being able to say, oh, see this, that, and the other thing. Well,
I will bring up one of the Ramsey pages right now so that we'll have something to refer to, and he can throw mine up on the screen. Let me just get to 1996 because that's really deep in the presentation. Much further down.
And meanwhile, if you wanted to talk about it, I can go.
Go ahead while I search.
I can go over and send some things to you. Why don't I do that?
Well, why don't you go ahead and cover some of the nuance? I'm here. Okay. Nope, that's Hunter Hayes in 97. So I'm almost. Okay, here we go. Do you want the first, second, or third page to talk about?
I'll just put them up. Let's see what you got.
Which one do you want? First, second, or third page?
Let's go first.
First. Okay. And let's begin our slideshow from there. Darn it. Oh boy. I lost it.
Oh, so that just points out I didn't ram the B right behind Terry on the thing here. That was intentional. I did that on your board originally. It's just to give it a little different.
I go from current slide. All right, let me see if I've got this screen shared real quick. Taskbar. Share screen. All right, Jason, if you could pop up that share screen. Okay, so here's the first page, Terry.
Okay. Can you zoom in on that and make it bigger?
I don't think that I can. Oh, there we go.
Maybe I can. I don't recognize this one with the lines under. Where did you get this one?
Oh, the lines underneath it were actually, like you said, about the unharmed or the unwarmed, the word possession with the misspelling.
Yeah, so you're right away. You're working with a faulty copy of the ransom note. Let me explain where that's at. If you go up a few lines where you've drawn those red lines, you'll see it says, well, the implied words are country that it serves. That word "it" there is the classic tampered with example of the word "it." It should have it should be wielding a weapon, and of course you can see that the contrast density has been tampered with on that document too. So you're really not working with a document you kind of want to be working with. You want to be working with one of the ones I've got, or there are better ones that I had earlier in this game. But slowly over time, the bad guys have messed with this copy that we see that's being presented online. But
that is something absolutely that I discussed in regards to the Zodiac letters. The portrayal of them online for people today are not how these documents originally looked. They have definitely manipulated them.
Okay, let me point the one I have in mind. You go down to the word tomorrow there, go on the left-hand side, and you come down to the word tomorrow. It says tomorrow to instruct you. Well, that word to right there, do you see that little giddy flag they put on the word two, that harkens back to one of those documents. I don't remember that it's lipstick so much. I think it's Degnan that one harkens back to.
Degnan is lipstick. That's one and the same. And yes, those
okay.
I call them the Tau T because they have the actual hook at the bottom, which could pose as a J.
And you can see kind of there's a J running right across the stem of that same word too. So yeah, that's an example. I don't know, but one of the ones, if you go over the word exhausting there, you have one of the denuses we want to talk about there, and but it's pointing to the word AS, the segment of words there, AUST in exhausting, and that's another thing we can talk about later. But you go ahead. We'll go with what. That's as well as I can do for you at the very moment. And I'm kind of shaking my brain here, but if I can go over to my other files, I have and look at those. And if you've got something that you want to present or talk, just give me a few minutes.
Yeah, no, not a problem.
Actually, some of the memory here. So
some of the things in this.
Here, look at it on my own, and my own little screen here.
So some of the things that we actually see in here is these belltop A's that we talked about in the Zodiac crime spree. And if we look at the very top, just beyond listen carefully, we are A, we see what I call the high back A's, where the actual overhang of the copybook A does not actually hang over the top of the bowl of the A. And these were the A's that were very prevalent in the Zodiac handwriting. So we actually got to see, I think, more of Jack's natural writing in the Ramsey note than any other communication that we've seen so far. I literally went to the end of this letter, which is where I started. And that is because that by the time I got to the end of it, I understood the individual was not going to be able to continue to disguise their handwriting for such a length of writing. So I brought up John, use that good Southern common sense. If we look in common, we see the capital letter M's that are the same size as the lowercase writing, written in a 3-stroke form. And this is Jack's natural M's. But these are the only M's that you find in this entire note that are written this way. The rest are written in a standard lowercase m form. So when I started to see these things pop up, I got extremely excited because I know that at the end of the writing, when a person tires from trying to keep the ruse up, they're eventually going to start dropping their own little, their own natural handwriting. And that's what we saw happen in this letter.
I see that. I know. I follow it exactly. It's I have my nose in this thing with a different train of thought. Well, several different trains of thought for so long that we're reviewing what you had originally said. But yeah, I understand. I follow, and I don't question what you're saying whatsoever. I mean, I'll tell you what. I just tore down my partition between. I tried to have this objective partition to say, look, Zodiac Jack is one person, Jack Tarrance is another person for the sake of being objective. But the partition was so thin, and the evidence is so complete with the Flova thing and all the other things that in my mind it's like, well, this is ridiculous. They're one and the same. And the one and the same he's shown that so many times over the years in different matters that aren't based on any expertise that I have with handwriting, and has to do more with his artistic tags and things that he did and how his repetitive he was. So that's
right.
And
you're actually seeing the creative form of the letter. So you're seeing an image. So when people think of the psychological tests where they show you a black and white image and what do you see, Terry actually sees an artistic image in these articulations of letters, whereas I see the disguise of the individual and how that is consistent with other crime sprees where he has written other communications. And I know you've done a lot more research on these cases than I have, and I'm going to be excited to climb into some of these cases with you and the things that you've read up on, because you've read all the books in regards to it. You've read all the files that you can get your hands on. You seem to actually put in your due diligence on these things.
I've tried to. That's the thing is, and you can't. Unfortunately, so with so many of those things there's so many. Somebody's writing a book. They want to sell the book. They're going to keep it interesting, and you wonder, about some of the things they're saying. But some of it, of course, is a lot of it is you're spinning your wheels. It's you want to move along like it. I want to move along to knowing, okay. And like I say, I think for me, the big breakthrough, I mean, I fiddled around with it for some years, so I can't sit and say, well, how come you cops didn't notice this? I can't say that because I had it in front of me for a long time, and I shopped around for help. I went around with the document, went to some of the smartest people I knew. I had one of the smartest people I knew confirm the results of the cryptic sign-off puzzle for the Ramsey node.
Speaking of that, we have that up right now, the Victory SBTC. Right. I know you did some work on that and you found some interesting points about it. Right. And we can also figure out how to get your slides up or into my presentation when we make it to the Ramsey stuff. But if you want to give us a brief synopsis on Victory SBTC and how that plays in.
Well, I had to go back and give you a little quick foundation. When I finally took my documents to an old childhood friend by the name of Bob Shields, I left the documents with him. I came back a week later with a question about something, a little wing ding on the second upper right-hand corner, second page. And he says, don't you think a lot of these D's on this thing, the small D's look like nooses? And I was like stunned on the spot because, oh my God, you're absolutely right. How did I miss that? And so.
I didn't even catch it, but I see it's in the way it.
The stray dog giveaway, and there's more attached to that stray dog thing than that's something we had talked about with, where he uses the letter I, but he detaches the base of it, so he's got a T sitting on top of an I, and that's going to be important when we get down back to the OCCK case, because I assert that Tim King appeared on the initial Zodiac Killer's debut letter, and appeared thereafter and all the way through the Zodiac case and right onto the Ramsey ransom node. And so but I'm jumping subjects here. And that's the trouble with this thing is there's so many things to talk about that it's easy for me to get off track. So let's go back to SBTs and how he got to SBT. Okay, so that 60 days later, I'd taken all the letter P's because I realized he was playing a little game with the P's. With that, I hope this is a children's show, but the word country is missing the letter O. I think both you and I know what I'm talking about here. And I noticed that the P's are all kind of pushed down onto the next thing and pointing heavily as they make their way through the document. I got to the last letter P, which is on the page we have up. It's the only letter P on that page. And I'm looking at it, I'm going, well, this one's different now. It's got the shaft of the thing, and it looks like it's a D on top of the shaft. And I go, oh, Detroit, Michigan, huh? Maybe, or Lake, Michigan. Is that the hint, Jack? And it's pointing down to the cryptic sign-off. And now am I getting my head of myself? No, I had those P's up for a while, and then another 60 days later from there, into February of 2017, one evening I was actually in a mood to be looking at the thing as a puzzle. So I wrote myself a little chart here. I've got it still taped to my monitor. That's A is 1, B is 2, all the way down the letter M, which is 13, and I put the other little half of the chart, N through Z on the right-hand side, which is 14 through 26. I thought, because I recognize that there he is with those colons again. He's got that colon for the letter I instead of a I. He's got a colon there, and he's got this dyslexic N, which is absolutely Zodiac Jack 101, because you can find that on the Paradise Slaves document. You get that dyslexic backwards N. So he's, and then if you look at it real closely, you can see that letter C is along. It's like a J laying down. I go, oh, okay, we're on to something. So I tried that little note that you had that I put up earlier here, which has victory, and then it has the letter that you're using the letters CTORY, and they come out as 3, a 20, a 15, a 14, and a 25. I'm actually looking at my note right now as I'm saying that to you, and it comes out as 320151825. Well, that's not going to work because I happen to know that Detroit was not in that latitude region. And as I went down to SBTC and tried it, that's 192.203. Well, that's not going to work because the longitude range of that area of the world of Michigan is minus 83 to minus 86. Well, remember, we're solving a little puzzle here. So I remember that we were, and of course I went to the top and I go, okay, so let's plug in the lower one, but we're going to need something to fix this. This is going to have to be 42, not 32. Well, he gives you that with the first digit of the letter J, which is the 10th letter of the alphabet. But he also gives it other different ways that he hints at that. Many is one of those kings where those things, and then of course, I tried to explain it several different ways, and I recently realized that, look, Terry, you're making it too difficult here. Just put up this little note, run with that, and say, look, we need to fix this thing. We have to do a fudge factor. Remember, we're talking about that fudge factor. Is always that always happens, and from what I understand about people exchanging messages, there's always a fudge factor. That way, if you get caught doing something wrong, you say, oh, well, your number is different than my number. Well, all we're doing is adding a 1 to that, and we're getting 42. And we don't need that 5 at the end. So I plugged in 420151882, and then I plugged in -86192203, got on the maps program and looked it up that way. It's a digital, instead of being minutes and seconds like they used to do, it's all a decimal type place method of navigation. And I landed in rural Michigan, with the nearest intersection to be found anywhere in the immediate area was Burke Street. And I go, oh, Burke Street? And Garrett Road. But still being kind of thick, I went down and saw Bob Shields the next day, I think it was. And he says, I got this, Bob. He says, oh, you mean like Garrett, like the device you used on the girl? I'm going, oh, and she's just slapped my own face, like, come on, Terry. That's what happens when you get tunnel vision. You're looking at something else and you have it. And that's why I am a slow and deliberate learner, because I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I've got to have certain things answered before we proceed here, or I'm not going to learn the subject. That's the way I'm wired. And so, okay, I had to be pulled off that track. I'm looking for something. I try to be, I might divide my work in half and quarters, or mince it up and say, well, I'll check this quadrant, I'll check that quadrant, I'll check this floor, I'll check that floor. But I'll go, if it's a 6-story building, I'll start at the middle. I'll start at the 3rd floor, and I'll look for my problem. Is it down below me, or I'm talking electronics now, or is it above me? I'm looking for a problem, and I'm trying to troubleshoot wiring in a building. So I was in that quadrant or that tunnel at the time, and it didn't sink into my head, Garrett and Garrett. So I took that back to another friend that I know to be a very, very bright guy. You never want to play cards with the guy. His name is Steve, and he's just really a ray of sunshine for how bright he is. He said, you got it. He says, it can't be anything else. He says, as a matter of fact, I think if you ran we were talking about the odds of that being a coincidence. The odds would be astronomical, improbable, bordering on impossible. They'd be greater than the odds that you're talking about. Sometimes you're talking about DNA evidence. That's how powerful that is. So he's right, I've got it. But bear in mind that I've discovered that there are variances you can apply to the same little puzzle. Like you can exchange SBTC with the letters P-E-E-P or P-E-E-N, because that's one of the things. And I did that, and it actually put me on the northbound lane of one of those roads, Burke Street, I think it was, in that same area of rural Michigan. So I'm like, oh, okay. But is that the main reason? And I will hint this, and I'm not going to go down this road too much further, but I see other things on the document that point to other areas of the world, and I quickly retreated from those things. I thought, okay, I'm not going to tip the bad guys. I'm not going to give this whole thing away. So there's some of those stuff that I'm not trying to be cryptic here. I'm just saying I got out of what I found. I'm going, oh, that's interesting. Let's get out of here. And I bailed, and I said, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm
and
like,
I say it's interesting, and I
need that. Maybe it's valuable. Maybe I know this is valuable, but I'm just saying that's what I found. So let's see.
Well, and every time I found myself on one of those roads, I dove head first, feet first, body first, right on into it.
Oh, yeah.
So now, what is the significance of Burke and Garrett? Why don't you explain that for everybody?
Well, Burke is her brother's name, of course, and he was recently maligned. Actually, that same year, almost within the same week that Bob pointed out those D nooses, there was a show on CBS by a company called Critical Content. And the gist of the show was they were laying they'd run out, they couldn't lay the crime on the parents anymore. So now we're going to lay it on Burke Ramsey, her brother, who was 9 years old at the time, was thoroughly checked out by a bunch of experts and cleared. He didn't do the crime. Plus, they were misrepresenting the damage to her body too. And so it was ridiculous, absurd. They got sued. They had to pay Burke an undisclosed amount of money, figure quite large. But
Well,
they got by with programming the public once again.
Terry,
So,
in 2008, Mary, the Boulder County DA, had actually cleared all 3 members of the Ramsey family by DNA from being the suspect. So yes, he was absolutely cleared 100% of the crime, just like Arthur Lee Allen was 100% cleared of the Zodiac crimes. And they continue with this misinformation, the dissemination. And to me, this looked more like a character assassination of the Ramsey family in general, because they wanted what he had.
It's anything but the truth is what it was. It was like a campaign. It's really like a political campaign, but you know, with the clip, hopefully with both candidates, you can tell who's really doing the most lying, and hopefully you make the right choice by picking the other one. I think, you know, but I don't, you know, digress into that, but I'm just, anything but the truth. So this had been a big cash cow for the media and the tabloids. I don't know how they got by with that. I suppose once her costume designer made those fancy costumes, because Mrs. Ramsey had deep pockets, that they figured she was fair game. But they started the process of this. The other thing that I got to tell you about Bob Shields is he's really smart. Is, I don't know, when did he say that? I'm trying to remember the order in which these things happened. He'd always say, one of his first comment was, whoever wrote this had a big brain. I said, right? And he repeated that a few times, and he said, you know, he said, who thinks like that? He was talking about. I said, right. This is my mind. Is who thinks like this? Who you know? I said, geez, Bob, my whole thing of looking at and handwriting and stuff, I never used to look at stuff, and now I'm noticing I have a lot of things about the whole, you know, the printed media thing that I never paid attention to before, and it's helping me kind of navigate some of this stuff. But the point that I was going to head for is, he'd always ask me, how long do you think in advance this guy wrote this document? And he says, it had to take him a long time. He kept repeating. And I said, right, it had to have. I said, you know, at first I didn't take his query as seriously as I should have, because I should really have been working in the direction of trying to figure out, well, what's the minimum amount of time it would have taken to do it? It's like saying, what's the minimum amount of cost it had to be for whomever this was all involved to fly back and forth and screw around at their house and leave the cowboy hat and all that crap that was left in their Charlevoix home. I mean,
Didn't they indicate that the pen and the pad of paper actually came from the Ramsey home?
Yes, it did. And a bunch of pages, like the broken piece of the paintbrush handle that was unfortunately used on the little girl, went missing, never to be found again. So those documents, I mean, they had the cops looking all over Boulder apparently, and could not find several missing pages. So yeah.
So just like the rest of the cases, all of the evidence comes up missing, and makes it almost improbable for somebody to come to a conclusion in these cases.
Right. One positive note to all that is, it turned out that the ink used on this document was of a much older dialect in a much older style. It was probably proved to be carcinogenic, or maybe it was cheaper to use whatever they had going on. But they figured out that this particular ink probably did not come from I shouldn't say probably, but it was different than the rest of the ink that they had. You know, Ramsey's had money, so if any of those, their Sharpies, I'd try to get all the life I can out of a Sharpie, but I mean, I'm sure they just throw them away, and they got a whole pack of them and went. And the ones that were in their house were a new pack, so there's a hint there. In other words, there's a lot of weird things you start getting in the crime scene. It's like Ramsey had a real nice brand new Maglite, and I think they said the one that he found left behind looked really beat up, and a Maglite was probably used to hit the girl in the head. So yeah. Anyway, we've slid off course, but I hope that I've adequately or properly explained what I see with the Victory SBTC and how that works. So because that's pivotal. But go ahead. We're trying to make a circle of evidence, as you and I talked about. We're up at Ramsey. How does it relate to the earlier and back? Because we're trying to show the connectivity of his work from the early crimes to late crimes, and it's definitely there. So go ahead. Whatever you want.
Right. I was going to say, let me, I'll pull back up some of your other topics here that I can ask you some questions about, because we did have, come on.
at a later date, we can put up the full documents. I'll get them to you, and hopefully they don't. See, even some of the ones I have generational losses to them. In other words, they've been copied so many times, and they're damaged.
Yes, my copies are very bad. I would love to see whatever it is that you have in regards to that too.
And I don't have the best that's available on the planet Earth, because I actually had asked if the Boulder police, real politely, if I could get a copy, and they just flatly said no. And so I'd be facing to get a copy of the original ransom note would be a FOIA lawsuit, which I'd like to see happen. And all I want is some super high grade copies of that document, because that's going to reveal, I believe, even more than we know today, because you're going to see the lines, you're going to see the details, you're going to see that little Pac-Man figurine on the last page better. You're going to see a lot of details. And of course, the most detailed letter in the whole gambit of letters is the letter R in Warren. Can't be made without masking the paper. It just could not be done. You won't get the details. So he had some. So it goes back to what we're talking about. How far in advance did this planning occur? And I had the idea that in the past, I had the idea that I think, just a guess, that when Ramsey moved to that house and his alarm kept getting tripped repeatedly, which shouldn't happen, it reminded me of a situation I had when I lived with another fellow here in town in Minneapolis decades ago, where his alarm did the same thing at the wrong time of the day. And eventually, of course, we lost our alarm altogether. And he was trying to get a dog in the house. I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with a dog. Turn your alarm back on. And of course, so this guy was working me down to get a dog, and I don't want a dog, but in the house, you're renting a house. And so the Ramseys just stopped using the alarm. And I don't know if they changed what they did in the alarm or whatever. So if my guess is right, they started tampering with the alarm back then.
Right. We've got about 5 minutes left here. Let me cover some of the things from your notes here. So some of the things you show that the lowercase r's found in the second paragraph resemble boomerangs. Now, how does that differentiate between the pistol form that we see in the checkmark R's from the Zodiac and the boomerangs found in the Ramsey note?
Well, I think you'd find, if you carefully studied all the documents, that most of those things he did move forward and back, or use them and revived them and brought them around. I don't have that in front of me, because my perspective, again, this tunnel vision, if you will, has been to say, look, I'm trying to identify all things I can on the Ramsey pages, and maybe perhaps to the point of a fault. If I would have had a bunch of people to help me with it, or somewhere, a room full of people, I'd say, hey, will you gather all this to answer your line of query there, and say, okay, gather all the ones that look like this elsewhere and put them together and put them in a presentation. And I'm sure, I'm confident you'll find them. There's no question in my mind whatsoever. So those things move forward. Like the JTs are much more subtle in his early documents. They're hard to find on some of the OCCK documents that had to do with Tim King, especially when they were ready to murder Tim King. And that is just a hint to me, just a guess, that it bothered.
So do you think that you went at this too?
I think Tim King bothered Jack Tarrance. He was a misogynist, woman hater, he might have been, but I think that one bothered him. He just put up an epitaph on that one, on the 78 document. And I consider that a Zodiac Killer document. I don't care what Daryl Gates or whoever it was at the time, the chief of police, said. I'm with the other people, and his detectives say, no, it's a genuine Zodiac Killer document. It's more genuine than most of the Zodiac Killer document. And again, it's loaded for bear, and it's primarily.
So Terry, can I ask you, so you probably went at this the same way I did, which when you looked at these messages, your first goal was to obviously not believe me. You thought I was crazy and off my rocker, but to exclude Jack from it by virtue of examining it for those very nuances. But what you found was that those nuances were identical between them.
It's true, but I didn't think you were off your rocker. Matter of fact, you were one of the more credible people on Dennis Kaufman's message board. I thought you were the most credible person on there. And,
Thank you.
And I knew that you were sticking with to the old Sergeant Friday, just the facts, ma'am. So no, I didn't think you're off your rocker. I just need to verify it for my own satisfaction that these things are true and that they ring true and they prove true. So they are repeatable and they did work out for me. So no, I was on the same page. It's just the only difference between you and me is that I put up that purchase and say, okay, Zodiac Jack is, well, you want to, let me explain something real briefly.
We got about 2 minutes. We got about 2 minutes, Terry.
The word Jack, by usage of the word Jack, came from realizing that in all of his Zodiac cards, his picture cards, he used the noun Jack was in common. The jack-o'-lantern, belly, the jackass, the
jackrabbits,
Jack,
yep, the Jack.
All were Jack down. So he's shouting at you, Jack, 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 Jack. And,
right.
And then on the Ramsey note, you've got the two spooks in the upper right-hand corner, but you also have a Jack on the second page. How did I come up with the two Jack? I came up with 3 Jacks on the ransom note. And now, my brain's in 3 places at once and that, but
yes, we've got 1 minute.
That's so hence Zodiac Jack. And I just recently said, hey, look, this partition between who Zodiac Jack is and who Tarrance was is thinner than rice paper. I mean, it's not going to, if somebody throws water on it, there's no barrier there. They're the one and the same, for Christ's sake. So
I've not found anything solid that allows me to exclude Jack from any of these crimes. So I'm going to continue to include them in the presentation, allow people to look at the evidence, form their own opinions based on what I have to share with them. I'm going to enjoy asking you back, especially as we move into these other cases, because you are very knowledgeable on the happenstances and the circumstances. So I do look forward to having you come back and discuss more with us. And we'll, by then, hopefully figure out how to put up all of your information and the displays that you have so that we can show the public what you got.
Oh yeah, we'll get it done. Not to worry. I will send these things to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Terry. You have a great day and we'll talk to you soon.
You too.
Everybody have a nice week or a great week.